anyway, I'm Daryl Black, the director of Seminary Ridge Museum. Thanks for coming out for our second, which should be our third, but it is now our second because we got rained out. The one time that it rained this summer was the day of our last tour. So.
And we see a couple of people who showed back up.
Yeah, they came back. So this is a good sign, I guess.
I guess so.
Anyway, what we're going to do tonight is take another little walk, covering a lot of the same ground we covered last time, but telling different stories. We're going to move the action forward, for those of you who were here last time, move the action forward to July 1st and focus specifically on the final United States Army assault on Seminary Ridge. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. But one of the things that we really kind of want to keep in mind here is the importance of this place in antebellum and Civil War history. Of the seminary building itself and what was going on in the seminary, because it's interesting. Stephen Barry, the professor, his Civil War historian from the University of Georgia, speaking at the Civil War Institute this last summer, made a really interesting comment. And Steve Barry has been a strong proponent of Civil War environmental history, thinking about the Civil War's impact on environments, of people living in environments, of weather, in a lot of areas of history that Civil War historians have not ventured into. And as the leader of that, he's developed a reputation, developed a following. University of Georgia is where a lot of the really creative environmental history of the Civil War is coming from right now, with dissertations and other scholarship. But he sat down at the Civil War Institute and he said, you know, we've done a really great job in the last 5 or 6, 10 years thinking about the Civil War happening outside and what that really means. Thinking about environment, landscapes, changes, transformations. But we have kind of lost track that the Civil War, the notion that the Civil War started inside. It started in seminaries where divergent ways of interpreting the Bible developed. This building itself embodied those conversations and those divisions and those fractures in American life. As American Christians, American Lutherans in this case, began to see the Bible in very different ways, depending on where you came from and your relationship to slavery. So we want to remember that as we take our walk tonight, because there's some people who were in this building who are very important and very much embody this notion of the Civil War starting inside but happening outside. And Pete, do you want to tell the story here?
Yeah, so I want to start by thinking about what this place was founded as. And Samuel Simon Schmucker, who's the founder of the Lutheran Seminary here at Gettysburg and its first president, he comes up to Gettysburg for the first time in 1826. In 1831, in fact, he comes up to this ridge and he wants to build a seminary building here. And one of the reasons that he chooses this ridge, which as it is today, was in 1831, it's on the edge of town. We also have to remember that town was much smaller in the 1830s than it is now. So you had about half a mile between here and where the town begins. And he moves the seminary out here because he thinks it's going to be a peaceful place for students to learn, for students to contemplate biblical teaching. And one of the first students that comes up here after this building is completed is a man named Washington Muller. And Washington Muller embodies the reason why the seminary was placed here in Gettysburg. And that is because it was close to both north and south. And Washington Muller was born in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a little bit of a hike, but it's not as bad as if the seminary was in Cooperstown, New York, which the first Lutheran seminary in the United States was. So it is a little bit more accessible. In any event, Washington Muller comes up here as one of the first students to be in this new building. And he writes in the Lutheran Observer newspaper, he says, "Here the world may be completely shut out from the mind and the soul, left to the uninterrupted," that's not uninterrupted for me, "left to the uninterrupted pursuit of spiritual good. But Schmucker finds out pretty quickly that this area is not going to be a place of peace. And over the 30 years between the time that this building is constructed in 1863, there are debates that are occurring within these walls over the meaning of freedom in America, over the Bible's teachings about slavery. Men like David Biddle, who goes on to be the leader of the Lutheran Church in the Confederate States, is here with men like Daniel Alexander Payne, who is the first African-American student, a native of Charleston, first African-American student to come and attend the seminary here, and Michael Eister, who is a signatory of the Adams County, a member of the Adams County Anti-Slavery Society. All taught by this man, Samuel Simon Schmucker, who is battling his own demons over the issue of slavery over a span of about 40 years. When he moves here in 1826, he brings with him 2 enslaved persons that were property of his wife's family, and he has them as indentured servants working in his home. By the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, he has to leave the area because he is an outspoken abolitionist. So all of these debates, I'd love to be a fly on the wall as Biddle and Payne and Eister and Schmucker are in this building talking about what it means to be American and what it means to be free.
And what it means to be a Christian.
And what it means to be a Christian in that time. So this is all happening over the 30 years before the physical blows that are going to come to the back door of this building that we'll talk about as we go through tonight's tour. Washington Muller is only here at this seminary for 1 semester. He goes back to South Carolina, founds a school, is principal of a classical academy that is tied to the Lutheran Southern Seminary.
Right.
And in 1860, he shows up on the census as owning 8 people. And we'll talk about his story as we go further on. Anything to add?
Lexington,
South
Carolina is right in the middle of the first plantation cotton belt in America. It's Fairfield because the fields are fair and there's a ton of capacity to grow cotton. And it's right at the center of the expanding cotton frontier in the late 18th and early 19th century, and by the time of the Civil War had become one of the wealthiest parts of one of the wealthiest states in the United States because of these humans held in property. In the Lexington district, there you're looking at, or Fairfield district, excuse me, it's Lexington County now.
Yeah.
In Fairfield district, about 70% of the residents of that county were enslaved people. The men that Pete's going to talk about and that we're going to talk about in a little bit are right in the middle of the slave South and what one historian calls a slave society. Very important for what happens here on July 1st. To keep that in mind. Where are these guys from? Where are the men who were fighting this battle from? And we'll talk about some other folks' point of origin in a little bit too, is a very sharp contrast to illustrate perhaps a little bit of the diversity and complexity of the South. So, Pete, you want to walk down the hill?
Yes.
We're going to go down over to the red path and down back to the bench down there at the bottom of the swale.